Well, hello everyone. This is Dr. Watkins, and I am your professor, of course, for Foundations of Communication with Columbia College. And this is Module 1. We're continuing to move into Chapter 1, especially as we go into our book called Raise Your Voice. And we are definitely looking at composing written and spoken arguments. But even more than that, we're thinking about this whole relationship between English and speech. And now we will say among, because it's not only speech and English, but also the reading component. And we are looking at the visual component. Back in November of 1914, and you see this in the very beginning of the book at the preface, it talks about a group of speech instructors that voted to withdraw from what was then the National Council of Teachers of English, and it still is the National Council of Teachers of English today. But the group that withdrew actually went out and started a speech association, which eventually became what we know now today as the National Communication Association. Interestingly enough, I am a member of both of those organizations. I am an English professor, and I'm also a speech and communication professor. So, all of that to say that while the divide had been rather pronounced over many years, we see that even the picture of James O'Neill, who was from the University of Wisconsin and served as the first leader or president of this speech group, would today perhaps be very pleased to a certain degree that a lot of the speech and English components have once again intertwined, and largely in part to technology. It's really hard to distinguish between one and the other, because if you think about it, when we're communicating, so many times we're doing all of the above. So we do know that when we are working on one area, we are helping another particular area. Whenever we are in the beginnings of this course, we really do focus, and all the way through, on this whole notion that in this world of communication, we are a part of a world of public argument. Now, if you take a look at the quote that's on the first page of the chapter, this is a quote by Dave Lackney, who is a marketing speaker, author, and trainer. I wanted to put in red some pieces of this quote. It's a longer quote, but if we really take this quote in, it has a lot to say to us, especially as we are with Columbia College. And of course, one of the many distinctions of Columbia College is that it has consistently prepared people for unique leadership development and to become effective leaders. And so in many respects, you're a part of that continuing tradition. So now we know why the communication class is here on the front end of the program. Now, whenever we think about argumentation, unfortunately, a lot of people think about the image that we see here. In fact, for some people, argument is nothing more than getting my way. Well, while these two girls seem to be arguing, we're not talking about that kind of arguing. And by the way, unfortunately, a lot of us do know that that kind of argumentation is not restricted just to children. Let's put it with persuasion, and when I say it, what I'm talking about is this whole notion of argumentation. Sometimes we simultaneously think of the two, but this is one of my favorite definitions for persuasion, because I think if we think of arguing and we think of the whole notion that persuasion is moving from one area to another, so to speak, then this quote makes particular sense. Gerald Miller, who wrote this in a book entitled The Persuasion Handbook, Developments in Theory and Practice, had this to say, and I quote, "Persuasion is the process," pay close attention to that word, process, "of creating, reinforcing, or changing people's beliefs or actions." End of quote. Now, a lot of people say there is no way we can escape the world of persuasion, that we're right in the middle of it. Think about what we said earlier about even why speech and English and what was pretty much for many years a sharp divide has really eroded, and technology is largely to thank, so to speak, for this situation. Advertising is everywhere. Now, if you take a look at this particular quote, we see that by the age of 20, the average American has been exposed to 1 million television commercials, and that's about an average of 150 every day. Now, I do think, even though this quote came out in 2012, that the whole business of television is not perhaps as strong as it once was, to the extent that it has become more and more seamless with the computer world. Think about how even our computer monitors in many respects look like television monitors, and vice versa. Everything has become so integrated and seamless. Even our smartphones in many ways can bring in the streaming component, but advertising is everywhere. Who wants our attention? Well, I think you probably know that the list is pretty long. A lot of us receive solicitations, and it's not just any one time of the year. Really not. So as you look at this particular list, I'm sure you will see some that really do tend to be out there in our paths more than others. But whenever we look at persuasion, it's not so much just thinking about selling a product necessarily, and certainly that is, but we're also talking about simply getting our ideas out there. Everybody has a point of view or a perspective. We do come with convictions, but one major part of a college education is realizing that being exposed to a multiplicity of different ideas is going to be beneficial to us in the long run. Yes, you can still stand firm on what you believe, but even if you are reinforcing what you do believe, if you're willing to see what others believe, then it might help you even more to defend your own position. And we will be working with this as we go throughout the course. I always laugh. I say that no matter what, Aristotle has a way of always coming into the picture whenever we're talking about communication. Pay close attention to ethos, pathos, and logos. Later on, we were going to make some what I call should statements. But ethos, if you think about the word ethics in English, really is all about choices, morals, but the whole quality of ethos, and certainly we could think about ourselves even as speakers and as writers, comes down to our credibility. What kind of credibility do you carry? In other words, if I'm going to talk with you about why you should, let's just say, support a certain cause, then what qualifies me to speak on that subject? What kind of training have I had? What kind of a perspective am I coming from? It's a major factor whenever we are trying to persuade. Pathos, of course, if you look at PATH, you can think about words we have in English like sympathy, empathy. Of course, sympathy is feeling for someone. Empathy is going even deeper than that. It is not only feeling, but knowing what the person is going through. But most important for us, especially in this world of argumentation in the academic environment that we have here at Columbia College, is going to be logos. Because if you think of the word logic, it's all about reasoning. And whenever we are putting arguments together, we definitely are working with what we call claims. Now, I know a lot of us are going to immediately think of claims in terms of, let's just say, insurance. I mean, we know a claim in the insurance world is definitely let's just say, an argument in terms of why a particular, let's just say, policy should be reinforced because perhaps there has been some kind of an injury or some kind of need to gather support from the benefit of what you pay for that insurance. Okay? Now, a claim in terms of our argumentation is all about debatable. So just like this gentleman is standing, probably a lawyer, in front of a jury in a courtroom, we can make arguments all the livelong day, but is the claim, the bottom line, a debatable statement? And in the English world, when we talk about claims, a lot of us are very familiar with the term thesis, a thesis statement. And so whenever we're working on claims in this course, we always want to be sure as we craft our arguments and analyze arguments that we can make sure that this is a debatable claim. Now, our text, especially in chapter 1, talks about specific types of claims, and I want you to be very familiar with these types. The first one that we will be taking a look at is what we call claims of value. And our text uses the example of Coke is better than Pepsi. Well, I wonder where you would fall on that particular claim. Well, wherever you would fall has everything to do with what kind of value you put on this particular claim. In other words, it's a judgment call. And a lot of what we do claim is based off of judgment. Also, we have claims that are based off of what we call claims of fact. So if we were to say having pets helps reduce your stress level, is that debatable? Certainly, but can we go in and get specific facts that would actually back that up? Another type of claim is a claim of policy. So in other words, if we were to argue that students should attend class every day, now I'm sure if we were talking about communication class, you would say absolutely, right? Oh, okay. Well, bottom line is that's a claim of policy. In other words, you're saying that we need a specific rule to back that up. And so here we go with evidence. When we talk about backing up a claim in the world of the courtroom, which a lot of us can identify with, we're talking about evidence. What kind of evidence do you have? Another major area that we're going to work on as we study argumentation is the so-called warrant. In other words, what is the connection between the claim and the evidence? Now, this particular graphic uses the term data. And so you can think of it as data. You can certainly think of it as evidence. But what is the connection there? The warrant. So we will be looking closely at that. Remember that arguments, and I love what our text says, an argument is not just a two-sided issue like these two pieces of bread over on the left-hand side. All bread is not one or the other. It's more like that picture of the bakery that's over on the right, and that certainly applies to arguments. Finally, when we look at advertisements, we are going to be analyzing them. Yes, we see some pretty obvious points here about Burger King and the Whopper, but what is it that is the implication here? In other words, can we read between the so-called lines and see a little bit more to this argument than just about Burger King? Okay, be sure to go back to the discussion board. I have our specific questions there based off of this lecture. Be sure to thoroughly read this chapter because the time you spend with working with it can definitely make you a more effective communicator, and that's what we're all about. I'll see you later. Take care.